The memorial garden at Naval Base Coronado sat quiet under the California stars. 12 granite stones arranged in a precise semicircle, each one catching the soft glow of solar lights that had flickered on as the sun disappeared behind the Pacific. Each stone bore a name, a date, a rank that meant something only to those who understood the language of war. Shadow, Titan, Valor Prime, Phantom, Thunder, Justice, Liberty, Courage, Honor, Sentinel, Guardian, Rex. Master Chief Petty Officer Maya Cordero sat on the wooden bench facing the stones, her hands resting on her knees. At 42 years old, she carried herself with the kind of stillness that comes from spending too many years in places where movement meant death. Her dark hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail, showed threads of gray she'd earned honestly. The casual civilian clothes, jeans and a faded navy t-shirt, hung loose on a frame that had once carried more weight. Beside her, Master Chief Sam Bridger shifted his position carefully. At 65, his joints protested the cool evening air, but he'd learned long ago that some discomfort was worth enduring. Some moments demanded presence more than comfort. His weathered face, lined with 40 years of sun and sand and smoke, reflected the amber light. He'd seen things, done things, lost things. The kind of losses that never quite heal but eventually scar over enough to let you keep moving. Two dogs lay at Maya's feet, German shepherds, both of them. Valor, 4 years old, rested his head on her boot with the contentment of an animal that knows exactly where he belongs. Rex Legacy, 5 years old, bore a jagged scar across his right shoulder, the kind of mark that doesn't come from training accidents. His eyes held something harder than his younger counterpart, something that spoke of places where the rules were different and the stakes were permanent. 20 feet away, Seaman Riley Jackson stood with her hands clasped behind her back. At 23, she carried herself with the earnest intensity of someone who still believed that dedication and discipline could overcome any obstacle. Her dark skin gleamed in the soft light, and her eyes never left Maya's face. Beside her, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, 32 years old and recently humbled in ways he was still processing, maintained a respectful silence. The training facility behind them had gone quiet for the night, the kennels dark except for the security lights that painted long shadows across the compound. In the distance, the Pacific whispered against the shore with the endless patience of something that had witnessed 10,000 years of human ambition and failure. Riley finally broke the silence. Her voice came soft, hesitant, as if she feared disturbing something sacred. Master Chief, tomorrow's your official retirement ceremony. 47 dogs will be there, full honors, but I still don't understand something. She paused, gathering courage. That first day, when you were just a maintenance worker, when Lieutenant Commander Hawk confronted you in the training yard, how did they know? How did 47 military working dogs know who you were when none of us could see it? Sam chuckled, a low, rough sound that carried decades of accumulated wisdom and no small amount of regret. I've been asking myself that same question for 3 years, Riley. Never got a straight answer. He glanced at Maya, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Though I suspect the answer isn't as simple as we'd like it to be. Maya remained still for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the memorial stones, on the names carved into granite, on the dates that marked the beginning and ending of partnerships that had meant more than most marriages, more than most friendships. Bonds forged in circumstances where trust wasn't just emotional comfort, but tactical necessity. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the texture of something that had been worn smooth by repetition, by remembering, by the act of turning memory into story so that the weight of it could be shared instead of carried alone. They didn't know who I was. She reached down, her fingers finding Valor's ear, scratching gently in the way that made the dog's eyes close with contentment. They knew what I was carrying. The wind moved through the memorial garden, rustling the leaves of the small trees planted behind each stone. Native California plants, drought-resistant and tough. The kind that survived because they'd adapted to harsh conditions. Riley stepped forward, unable to contain her need to understand. What do you mean, Master Chief? Maya looked up at her, really looked at her, seeing not just the eager young handler standing before her, but seeing herself at that age. Seeing all the young warriors who'd passed through her program over the past 3 years. Seeing the ones who'd deployed and come back changed. seeing the ones who'd learned the lessons she'd paid for with pieces of herself she'd never get back. You want to know the real story? Maya asked quietly. Not the legend that gets passed around in the handler courses, not the screenshots that went viral on social media, not the sanitized version that'll get told at tomorrow's ceremony. She paused. You want the truth? Riley nodded without hesitation. Sam shifted on the bench, his hand moving to rest on Maya's shoulder, a gesture of support, of solidarity, of shared understanding between two warriors who'd both learned that some truths were heavy enough to require help in the telling. Then I need to take you back, Maya said. 3 years ago, this facility, a morning that started like any other morning, 0630 hours. A woman with a mop walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe it was exactly the right place at exactly the right time. I'm still not sure which. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the present seemed to fade slightly. As if by speaking, she was already halfway back into memory. Before I tell you what happened that day, you need to understand what brought me here. Why I was working maintenance. Why I was hiding. Her voice dropped lower. Why 47 military working dogs refused to leave my side even when their handlers ordered them to. Riley sat down on the grass, cross-legged, like a student settling in for a lesson she knew would be important. Marcus remained standing but moved closer, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Maya's fingers traced the edge of the bench, finding a groove in the wood worn by weather and time. 3 months before that morning, I arrived at this base with one goal: to disappear, to be invisible, to do simple work that didn't require me to make decisions where the cost of being wrong was measured in lives. She looked at the memorial stones again. Because 3 months and 2 days before that morning, I was standing in a field hospital in Kandahar, Afghanistan, watching them load 6 bodies onto a transport plane. The weight of those words settled over the garden like fog rolling in from the ocean. 6 dogs, Maya continued, her voice steady but quiet. All lost in a single operation, all under my command. All dead because I made the calls that put them in positions where the enemy fire was thickest and the odds were longest. She paused. They gave me a medal for that operation. Told me I'd prevented a catastrophe. Told me that without my team's actions, the entire compound would have been overrun and 63 Americans would have died instead of just 6 dogs. Sam's hand tightened on her shoulder. That's when you retired, Riley said softly. That's when I ran, Maya corrected. There's a difference. Retirement is an honorable end to service. Running is what you do when you can't face the thing you've become, when you can't look at another dog without seeing the ones you lost, when you can't sleep without hearing them in the dark, waiting for commands that will never come. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object. Even in the dim light, the trident was visible. The eagle, the anchor, the flintlock, pistol, the Naval Special Warfare insignia that marked someone as a SEAL. I came here to Naval Base Coronado because I needed to be around dogs. I know that sounds contradictory. Running from them but needing to be near them. But grief isn't logical. Loss isn't rational. She turned the insignia over in her fingers. I thought if I could just be around them without the responsibility, without the weight of command, without having to send them into danger, maybe I could heal enough to figure out what comes next. So you took a job in maintenance, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his voice. I took a job that let me clean kennels, empty trash cans, mop floors, watch handlers train their dogs from a distance, be present without being involved. Maya's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. For 87 days, it worked. I showed up, did my job, went home. Nobody looked at me twice. Nobody asked questions. I was just another person in a blue uniform pushing a mop bucket. Riley leaned forward. What changed on day 88? Maya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different quality, the tone of someone who'd crossed a threshold and found themselves in territory they hadn't intended to enter. Day 88, I made a mistake. A simple mistake. I misread the training schedule. Walked into the tactical simulation area 15 minutes early. The area was supposed to be empty but cleaning. It wasn't. She looked up at the stars as if seeking guidance from something beyond the immediate. Lieutenant Commander Brandon Hawk was running an advanced handler session. 50-plus personnel, 47 military working dogs, and suddenly there I was, standing in the middle of their training area with a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other. "What did you do?" Riley asked. "Nothing." Maya's voice was flat. I froze, not from fear, from memory, because standing there surrounded by all those dogs, watching them work, something in me broke. Or maybe it was already broken, and that moment just revealed the cracks I'd been hiding. Sam spoke for the first time in several minutes, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to conceal. "I was there that day, in the equipment shed, watching. I saw you standing there, and something about your stillness made me pay attention. Most people, when they realize they've made a mistake like that, they panic. They apologize. They rush to get out of the way." He shook his head slowly. "You just stood there like you belonged. Like you had every right to be exactly where you were, even though you were clearly out of place." "Brandon Hawk didn't see it that way," Maya said. "He saw a maintenance worker disrupting his training. He saw someone who needed to be removed. Immediately. He came at me with his hand raised to physically shove me out of the area." Riley's eyes went wide. "He tried to touch you?" "He tried," Maya confirmed, "but he never made contact. Because in the space between his intention and his action, 47 dogs moved as one. The memory of that moment seemed to fill the garden. The weight of it, the strangeness of it, the way something inexplicable had manifested in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. They didn't attack," Maya continued. "They didn't bark or growl or show aggression. They simply positioned themselves between Brandon Hawk and me, a wall of muscle and discipline and absolute refusal to allow him to reach me." She paused. "And then Titan, this massive Malinois with a reputation for being barely controlled, lowered himself to the ground at my feet and put his head in the dirt. Complete submission, complete trust." Marcus made a sound low in his throat, disbelief mixing with dawning comprehension. "That's impossible. Military working dogs are trained to respond to their handlers, to specific commands. They don't just decide to protect a stranger. They don't refuse direct orders from certified trainers." "I know," Maya said simply, "but they did. All 47 of them. They refused to move, refused to respond to commands, refused to leave my set for reasons that nobody could explain, and I couldn't understand." "But you understand now," Sam said quietly. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded slowly. "They smelled it on me. They smelled 12 years of deployments. They smelled cordite and blood and the particular scent that comes from being in places where death is a constant companion. They smelled other dogs, the partners I'd lost. Somehow, on a level that has nothing to do with training or commands or human understanding, they recognized me. They knew I was pack, that I'd lost my pack, that I was grieving." She looked down at Valor, at Rex's legacy, at the two dogs who'd chosen to stay close to her even in this quiet moment years removed from the crisis that had first revealed her. "Dogs don't forget," Maya said softly. "They don't forget scent. They don't forget loss. And they especially don't forget pack. Even dogs I'd never met, even dogs that were generations removed from the ones I'd trained, somewhere in their genetic memory or their collective consciousness or whatever you want to call it. They knew. They remembered. They protected." Riley wiped at her eyes, not bothering to hide the tears that had started to fall. "What happened next?" she asked. "After the dogs refused to leave you?" Maya's expression shifted, something harder moving behind her eyes. The look of someone remembering the moment when privacy ended and exposure began. Then the test started because Brandon Hawk couldn't accept that a maintenance worker had somehow gained control of his dogs. So he challenged me. He asked me to make them sit. I did. He asked me to order them into defensive perimeter formation, an advanced tactical formation that's classified, that takes months to train, that civilian handlers never learn. I did that too. Sam made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something more pained. "I was watching when you did that. Watching when 47 dogs flowed into a combat deployment diamond that I'd only ever seen used in Fallujah, in Baghdad, in places where the enemy was coming from multiple vectors and every angle needed coverage. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. That's when I started to suspect. But I didn't say anything. Because if you were who I thought you might be, you had reasons for hiding. And I'd been in this life long enough to know that sometimes the reasons for hiding are more important than the truth being hidden. Maya looked at him with something like gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for that, for not saying anything, for letting me keep my anonymity for those few more hours. Hours? Riley asked. It didn't last longer than that. Maya shook her head. No, because after the formation, after the weapons handling test, after I demonstrated combat veterinary protocols that aren't available to civilians, the facility alarm went off. Emergency. Dog down at the obstacle course. Severe trauma. Her hands clenched into fists on her knees. The memory of that moment clearly still sharp enough to cut. Rex, a 4-year-old German shepherd, trapped under a collapsed A-frame obstacle, bleeding out, going into shock. And when I saw him like that, saw him dying, every instinct I'd spent 3 months suppressing came flooding back. I didn't think, I just moved. You saved his life, Marcus said, not a question, a statement of fact. I did, Maya confirmed. But in the process of saving him, I lost the only thing I'd managed to hold on to during those 3 months. My anonymity, my ability to hide, my chance to heal in private. She stood slowly, both dogs rising with her, walked to the nearest memorial stone, placed her hand on the cool granite, fingers tracing the name carved there. Because when Brandon Hawk grabbed my shoulder to pull me away from Rex, when he yanked me backward, my shirt caught on the metal framework of the collapsed obstacle. Her voice went flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reporting facts because feeling them would be too costly. The fabric tore, old uniform, worn thin from months of washing. It tore from collar to hem, and suddenly every person in that training yard could see my back, could see the tattoos, the scars, the evidence of everything I'd tried to hide. Riley stood as well, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. The 12 paw prints, she said softly. One for each partner you lost. One for each warrior who died serving alongside me, Maya corrected gently. They weren't just partners, Riley. They were brothers, sisters, family. Each one gave everything they had because I asked them to, because the mission required it, because that's what we do in this life. We ask for sacrifice, and we honor it, and we carry the weight of it forever. Sam stood with effort, his joints protesting, but his will overriding the discomfort. He moved to stand beside Maya, his own hand resting on another memorial stone. I was there when your shirt tore. I saw the tattoos, the coordinates, the inscription, silent service, eternal watch, Ghost Unit 7. He turned to look at her profile. I saw Colonel Hartley's face when he recognized what he was seeing. Saw him come to attention and salute with a precision that made it clear he knew exactly who you were, what you'd done, what you'd sacrificed. Master Chief, Riley said, the rank falling from her lips with reverence. That's when everyone knew. When the maintenance worker turned out to be one of the most decorated canine handlers in Naval Special Warfare history. Maya turned away from the memorial stone, her eyes finding Riley's in the darkness. That's when everyone knew I'd been lying to them for 3 months. That's when the rumors started. That's when people began pulling up classified files and making connections and spreading stories that were half truth and half legend. She moved back to the bench, sat down heavily. That's when I had to decide whether to keep running or to finally stop. Marcus spoke carefully, choosing his words with the caution of someone who'd learned that some questions carried weight beyond their simple asking. What made you decide to stay? Maya was quiet for a long time. The garden settled around them, the memorial stones standing their eternal watch, the ducks patient and present, the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. 6 hours after my identity was exposed, I got a phone call, encrypted line, scrambled number. The kind of call that civilians never receive and most military personnel only encounter in training scenarios. She looked at her hands, at the calluses that years of service had etched into her palms. It was an operational notification. Ethiopia, Addis Ababa region, 6 humanitarian workers held hostage by militant faction. 3 of them children. 48 hours until execution. Riley's breath caught audibly. They wanted you to go back, Sam said. Not a question. They told me I was the only handler with regional operational experience, the only one who could work with Rex Legacy's bloodline in that specific terrain, the only one those dogs would follow into an environment where one mistake meant everyone died. Maya's voice remained steady, but something in her posture shifted, tightened. They told me 3 children were going to die if I didn't answer the call. Did you go? Riley asked, though the answer was already written in the presence of Rex Legacy, in the scars he carried, in the way Maya's hand unconsciously reached to touch his head. 72 hours later, I was on a plane with Rex Legacy. 3 weeks after that, I came back with 6 hostages rescued and 0 casualties on our side. Maya's fingers traced the scar on the dog's shoulder. Rex Legacy and I both came back different than we left, changed by what we'd seen, what we'd done, what we'd survived. She looked up at Riley, at Marcus, at the young warriors who represented the future of the program she'd built over the past 3 years. But I came back. That's the important part. I came back because while I was gone, Valor nearly gave up hope. Because dogs don't understand deployment. They understand present or absent, here or gone. And when enough time passes without their person returning, something in them shuts down, breaks, stops believing that hope is worth maintaining. Valor pressed harder against her leg, as if remembering those 3 weeks of waiting, of not knowing, of the slow dimming of light that comes when trust begins to erode. When I came back and saw what my absence had done to him, when I saw how close he'd come to giving up, I understood something I hadn't understood before. Maya's voice strengthened. I understood that hiding from service doesn't protect you from the cost of service. It just means you pay that cost alone, without purpose, without meaning, without the ability to turn pain into something that matters. Sam nodded slowly, understanding blooming in his weathered features. That's when you agreed to stay, to teach, to build the program. That's when I finally accepted that I couldn't outrun what I was, that the only choice I had was how to use what I'd become. Maya stood again, both dogs rising with her. So I stayed. I designed a curriculum from the ground up. I trained 127 handlers over 3 years. I deployed 89 of them into combat zones. I lost 3 dogs in those deployments. 3 handlers were wounded, but all of them came home alive. She turned to face Riley directly, closing the distance between them until she stood close enough that the young handler could see the lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the cost written into her features. That's my legacy, Riley. Not the Navy Cross, not the 12 deployments, not the classified operations that will never be declassified. My legacy is every handler who came through my program and brought their partner home alive. Every dog who survived because I taught their handler to see them as warriors instead of tools. Every bond that formed strong enough to overcome fear and distance and the 1,000 ways that war tries to break us. Riley's voice came thick with emotion. Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for showing us what it really means to serve. Maya shook her head slightly. Don't thank me yet. You deploy in 6 months. Let's see if you still feel grateful after you've made the calls I taught you to make. After you've experienced the cost firsthand. After you understand that everything I taught you was paid for with pieces of myself I'll never get back. The wind moved through the memorial garden again, stronger now, carrying the salt smell of the Pacific and something else. Something that might have been memory, or might have been simply the weight of words spoken into darkness. Marcus cleared his throat, breaking the moment gently. Master Chief, you said you'd tell us about that first day, about what happened after the dogs protected you, about the tests, about the moment when everything changed. Maya looked at him, then at Sam, then back at the memorial stones that had been silent witnesses to this entire conversation. You're right, I promised you the real story, not the legend, not the sanitized version. She moved back to the bench, sat down, and Valor and Rex Legacy arranged themselves at her feet once more. Then let me take you back to that morning. Let me show you what happened when a woman with a mop walked into the wrong place and 47 military working dogs decided she was worth protecting. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, it was as if the 3 years between that morning and this evening had collapsed into nothing. As if by speaking, she could make the past present again. Make the witnesses see what she had seen, feel what she had felt. Understand what it meant when everything you'd built to protect yourself came crashing down in a single moment. 0630 hours, she began, her voice taking on the cadence of a story told not for entertainment, but for instruction, for preservation, for the passing of knowledge that couldn't be learned any other way. Naval Base Coronado Canine Training Facility. The sun was just coming up over the Pacific. The morning was cool but not cold. Perfect California weather. The kind of day that feels like nothing bad could possibly happen. Sam settled back against the bench, his body relaxing into the familiar rhythms of a story he'd witnessed firsthand. Riley sat down on the grass again, her attention absolute. Marcus remained standing but leaned against one of the memorial stones with careful respect. And Maya Cordero, Master Chief Petty Officer retired, warrior and handler and teacher and survivor, began to tell them the truth about the day her carefully constructed anonymity shattered and her life changed in ways she was still learning to understand. The growl started low, a rumble that vibrated through the dirt of the canine training yard like distant thunder rolling across the desert. Then it multiplied. 47 military working dogs, Belgian Malinois bred for aggression, German shepherds trained to kill on command, Dutch shepherds that could track a man across 3 miles of badlands, all vocalizing at once. The sound rolled across the 200 by 300 foot facility like a living wall of threat. Lieutenant Commander Brandon Hawk gripped the microphone clipped to his tactical vest, his face flushing red beneath the morning sun. A woman stood in the center of the tactical simulation area, small, maybe 5'4", wearing the faded blue uniform of the facility maintenance crew. She held a mop in one hand, a bucket in the other. The early morning sun at 0630 hours cast her shadow long across the dust and dirt that covered the training ground. Around the perimeter, more than 50 military personnel had frozen mid-task. Trainers, students, administrative staff, contractors. All eyes on the scene unfolding before them. Brandon strode forward, his boots striking the ground with deliberate force. Brandon strode forward, his boots striking the ground with deliberate force. The morning sun cast his shadow long across the training yard, stretching toward the woman who stood motionless in the center of the tactical simulation area. I asked you a question. His voice carried the sharp edge of authority challenged. This is a tactical training area. Maintenance personnel are not authorized during active sessions. Remove yourself immediately. Maya Cordero stood perfectly still. The mop handle rested loose in her right hand. The bucket sat on the ground beside her left foot. Her eyes tracked across the semicircle of dogs positioned between her and the approaching officer. But she said nothing, made no move to comply, made no move to explain. Just stood there with the kind of stillness that comes from having spent years in places where movement draws fire. I'm talking to you, Bob. Brandon closed the distance, his hand rising toward her shoulder. Are you deaf or just... 47 dogs moved as one. No barking now, no growling. Just fluid, synchronized motion, like a school of fish changing direction in perfect unison. Every dog from the 65-pound Malinois to the 90-pound shepherds flowed into position between Brandon and Maya. A living wall of muscle and teeth in absolute discipline. Their eyes locked on Brandon, ears forward, bodies coiled with potential energy. Not aggressive, not submissive. Something else entirely. Something that made every witness feel the air pressure change in the training yard. Brandon jerked backward as if he'd touched an electric fence. His hand dropped. His face cycled through confusion to anger to something that might have been fear. What the hell? He spun toward the nearest trainer. Tighten down. Rex, heel. All dogs return to kennels immediately. Not one dog moved. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen sprinted across the yard from the obstacle course, his pristine trainer uniform collecting dust with each stride. At 32 years old, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd spent the last 8 years mastering his craft. He'd trained hundreds of handlers, worked with dozens of military working dogs, earned his instructor rating through demonstrated excellence and consistent results. But standing there looking at 47 dogs, refusing direct commands from certified handlers, his confidence wavered. Sir, I don't understand this. Marcus's voice carried genuine bewilderment. These dogs have never refused a direct command. They're trained to respond to handler authority regardless of environmental distractions. This shouldn't be possible. I know how they're trained. Brandon's voice cracked slightly, the loss of control visible in the tension across his shoulders. I wrote half the protocols for this facility. Order them to stand down, now. Marcus squared his shoulders, drew himself up to full height, projected the command voice they taught in every handler course. The voice that starts in the diaphragm and carries absolute certainty. The voice that dogs are conditioned to obey without question. Tighten down, Rex, heel, all dogs return to kennels. 47 dogs remain motionless. Then tighten, the massive Malinois with a scar across his muzzle from where he'd torn through chain-link fencing during a training accident 2 years prior. The dog that had sent 3 trainers to medical with bite injuries because his prey drive sometimes overrode his training, slowly lowered himself to the ground in front of Maya. His head pressed against the dirt, his entire body flattened in a posture of complete submission. The kind of submission that working dogs reserve for pack leaders, for alphas, for handlers they trust with their lives. Holy hell, someone whispered from the crowd that had gathered along the perimeter of the training yard. Brandon turned his glare on Maya. His face had gone from red to a deeper shade that suggested blood pressure climbing toward dangerous territory. What did you do to them? What are you hiding? Maya didn't answer, didn't even look at him. Her eyes tracked across the dogs with the kind of assessment that comes from pattern recognition drilled so deep it becomes automatic. Not fear, not confusion, evaluation. Reading their body language, their ear positions, their weight distribution. Understanding what they were communicating without words because she'd spent thousands of hours learning to read exactly these signals. Search her, Brandon snapped at the 2 nearest trainers. Check for food, electronic devices, pheromone sprays, anything that could influence animal behavior. I want to know what she's using to control these dogs. 2 trainers moved forward with visible hesitation. The dogs shifted slightly, maintaining their protective formation but allowing the approach. Understanding somehow that these humans meant no immediate threat, that the search was permitted even if the aggression wasn't. They found nothing. No treats hidden in pockets, no whistles on lanyards, no electronic training collars concealed under clothing, no scent lures or pheromone compounds. Just a woman in a maintenance uniform with empty pockets and calloused hands that told stories her mouth refused to speak. Lieutenant Victoria Sterling appeared from the administrative building like someone drawn by the scent of chaos. At 35 years old, she moved through the world with the casual certainty of someone who'd never questioned her place in it. Her crisp officer's uniform showed not a single wrinkle. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the morning sun. She took in the scene with a practiced smirk that suggested she'd already decided how this story would end. The cleaning lady causing trouble. Her voice dripped with contempt so casual it had clearly become habit. How unexpected. Perhaps she's lost. Someone should escort her back to where she belongs, preferably off this base entirely. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of discomfort spreading through the watching personnel. Several trainers exchanged glances. Seaman Riley Jackson, barely 23 years old and fresh enough from handler school that her uniform still looked new, bit her lip and looked away. The casual cruelty in Victoria's voice made her stomach turn, but she was too junior to object, too new to challenge an officer's behavior no matter how inappropriate it seemed. Marcus circled Maya slowly, studying the formation of dogs around her, his instructor's mind working through the problem like a tactical puzzle, trying to find the logical explanation, the rational cause for behavior that shouldn't be possible. Sir, permission to attempt treat-based recall? Granted. Marcus produced a handful of freeze-dried liver treats from his training pouch. High-value rewards. The kind of treats that could interrupt prey drive mid-chase. The kind of rewards that working dogs would abandon nearly any task to obtain. He held them up at shoulder height, letting the scent carry on the morning breeze that swept across the training yard from the direction of the Pacific. Dogs come, treat. Not one ear twitched toward him. Not one nose lifted to test the air. Not one eye broke focus from Brandon. 47 sets of eyes remained locked on the lieutenant commander with unblinking intensity, as if the treats didn't exist, as if nothing existed except the potential threat they'd positioned themselves to counter. Maya set down her mop. The movement was economical, precise, no wasted motion. She straightened and something in her posture changed in a way that most of the watching personnel couldn't consciously identify but registered on an instinctive level. Her shoulders squared, her feet positioned themselves shoulder-width apart. Her hands came to rest at her sides with thumbs aligned perfectly with the seams of her uniform pants. Weight balanced evenly, spine straight, chin level, parade rest. The stance drilled into military personnel until it becomes unconscious, until the body defaults to it without thought whenever standing at ease but maintaining military bearing. A stance that takes thousands of hours of repetition to make automatic. A stance that civilians don't learn because they have no reason to learn it. Nobody seemed to notice except Master Chief Sam Bridger, watching from the equipment shed where he'd been organizing training materials when the commotion started. At 65 years old, his body carried the accumulated damage of 40 years working military dogs, 2 decades as a SEAL handler, another 20 as a trainer and consultant. His knees ached, his back complained, his hands showed the scars of 100 dog bites accumulated over a career spent teaching warriors with teeth. But his eyes remained sharp, his mind stayed tactical. And standing there watching Maya Cordero shift into parade rest like breathing, something clicked in his memory. Something familiar. Something he couldn't quite place but knew was important. Chief Petty Officer Derek Walsh jogged up from the logistics building, tablet clutched in one hand. At 40 years old, he'd spent his entire career in security and intelligence work. He approached every situation as a potential threat until proven otherwise. Trusted protocol more than instinct. Believed in verifiable data over gut feelings. "Sir, this is a security issue." His voice carried the clipped precision of someone delivering a threat assessment. She could be using subliminal training methods we're not aware of. Pheromone compounds. Ultrasonic frequencies outside human hearing range. There are black market training tools from overseas. Chinese. Russian. Designed to compromise conditioning protocols. She could be running an operation to test our security measures or map our training procedures. We should tag her as a potential threat and remove her from the facility entirely. Brandon nodded sharply, seizing on the suggestion like a drowning man grabbing a rope. "Agreed. Someone get Colonel Hartley down here. I want this documented. I want a full security workup. I want to know who she is and what she's doing on my base." His base. The possessive fell from his mouth without conscious thought, but several people noticed. Several people filed it away as data about Brandon's mindset, about how he viewed authority, about the ego that drove his decision-making. Colonel James Hartley arrived 7 minutes later. At 58 years old, he moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body remembered being capable of explosive violence, but had learned through injury and age that conservation of motion mattered more than demonstration of capability. He'd spent 20 years as a SEAL before the back injury that ended his operational career. Another 12 years behind desks managing programs and people. His face had been weathered by sun and salt water, and 20 years of holding secrets that aged you from the inside. He stood at the edge of the training yard with arms crossed, observing without interference. His face revealed nothing. His eyes tracked across the formation of bugs, across Maya standing perfectly still, across Brandon radiating frustrated authority, across the crowd of personnel trying to understand what they were witnessing. He'd seen strange things in his career, seen things that defied easy explanation, learned that sometimes the universe presented situations that required patience and observation rather than immediate action. Brandon approached Maya again, this time maintaining careful distance from the wall of dogs. "If you're so innocent in all this, prove it. Make them sit." For the first time since Brandon had started speaking, Maya looked directly at him. Her eyes were brown, flat. The kind of eyes that have seen things and filed them away in compartments most people don't have. The kind of eyes that belong to people who've learned that showing emotion is tactical weakness, that revealing thought invites manipulation, that the best defense against interrogation is perfect stillness. She held his gaze for 3 seconds, long enough to make it clear she wasn't intimidated, long enough to communicate that his authority meant nothing to whatever calculation she was running, long enough to make several people shift their weight uncomfortably because there was something in that flat stare that felt dangerous despite her small frame and maintenance uniform. Then she raised her right hand, made a gesture. palm flat, fingers together. A sharp downward motion from shoulder height to waist level, followed by a twist of the wrist that rotated her palm from facing down to facing up. The movement crisp, precise. Nothing like the exaggerated hand signals taught in NATO standardized military working dog programs. Nothing like the broad gestures that needed to be visible at distance. This was something smaller, more efficient, the kind of signal that would work in close quarters when you needed to communicate without drawing attention. Every dog sat, perfect synchronization, perfect form, haunches on the ground, chest forward, front leg straight, eyes still locked forward in guard position. 47 dogs moving as a single organism. 47 dogs responding to a signal that shouldn't exist in their training. That couldn't exist in their training unless someone had taught it to them using methods that weren't documented in any official program. Marcus's jaw went slack. His tablet slipped from his fingers and landed in the dust with a soft thump that nobody noticed because everyone was too busy staring at the impossible thing they just witnessed. That's not in our manual. His voice came out barely above a whisper. That's not in any manual I've ever seen. Where did you learn that signal? Maya lowered her hand, returned it to parade rest position. Said nothing. Her face showed no triumph, no satisfaction. Just that same flat neutrality that gave away absolutely nothing about what she was thinking or feeling. Victoria laughed from her position near the admin building. The sound sharp and dismissive. Lucky guess. Anyone can make dogs sit. My nephew does it with his golden retriever at home. Next you'll tell me she can make them roll over too. She examined her nails with exaggerated disinterest. Can we please get back to actual training? Some of us have real work to do. Some of us have responsibilities that matter. The contempt in her voice made Riley wince, made several other junior personnel look at the ground, made Sam Bridger's hands clench into fists where he stood by the equipment shed because he'd heard that tone too many times in his career, the tone that separated people into categories of worth based on rank and status rather than character and capability. Riley leaned toward another young handler standing beside her near the training dummy. Did you see how clean that was? Her voice dropped to a whisper that still carried in the morning quiet. All 47 dogs responded like they were one organism, like they shared a single brain. I've never seen synchronization like that outside of demonstration teams that trained together for months. Brandon's face darkened from red to something approaching purple. The veins in his neck stood out. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from grabbing Maya and shaking answers out of her. Fine, you want to play handler? Let's see how far this parlor trick goes. Order them into defensive perimeter formation. It was a test designed to fail, designed to expose Maya as a fraud, designed to prove that whatever she'd done to make the dog sit was just luck or coincidence or something that wouldn't hold up under real tactical demands. Defensive perimeter was an advanced tactical formation requiring dogs to position themselves in a protective diamond pattern with overlapping fields of coverage. 4 dogs at cardinal points, 4 more at diagonal positions. The remainder filling gaps to create interlocking zones where every angle had coverage. Every approach had him on position to intercept. It took months to train, required constant reinforcement, demanded perfect communication between handler and team. Civilian handlers never learned it because it had zero application outside military operations. Most military handlers never learned it because it was reserved for special operations units that needed that level of protection in hostile territory. Maya didn't hesitate. She brought 3 fingers to her lips and produced a sound. Not quite a whistle, something lower frequency and more modulated. 2 short bursts followed by 1 sustained note that seemed to vibrate in the chest cavity of everyone close enough to hear it clearly. The kind of sound that would carry over ambient noise but wouldn't draw attention from someone not listening for it specifically. Then a hand signal, fist closed at chest height, opened with fingers spreading outward in 4 directions like a compass rose, then closed again. The entire sequence taking maybe 2 seconds. The dogs flowed into formation like water finding its level. 4 dogs at cardinal points, north, south, east, west. 4 more at the diagonal positions, northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. The remaining 39 filling the gaps between them with perfect spacing, creating an interlocking defensive grid that provided 360-degree coverage, the kind of formation used in hostile territory when a handler needed protection from all angles simultaneously, when threat could come from anywhere and everywhere, and the only defense was perfect positioning. Sam Bridger stepped out from the equipment shed. His boots crunched on gravel as he crossed the yard toward the formation. His eyes never left the positioning, never stopped analyzing the spacing and angles and overlapping fields of coverage that shouldn't be possible without extensive training. That's combat deployment formation. His voice carried the rough texture of someone who'd breathed too much smoke and sand over too many years. That's what we used in Fallujah when we expected ambush from multiple vectors. That's what we used in Ramadi when every window could hide a sniper and every doorway could conceal an IED triggerman. Where the hell did you learn that? Maya remained silent, standing in the center of the diamond with perfect stillness, surrounded by dogs who'd positioned themselves with tactical precision that most human teams couldn't match. Captain Nathan Pierce emerged from the veterinary clinic, medical bags slung over one shoulder. At 45 years old, he'd spent his entire career in military veterinary medicine. He'd treated combat wounds on dogs in Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd performed emergency surgery in field hospitals with mortar rounds falling close enough to shake the operating table. He'd saved lives and lost lives and learned to live with both outcomes. But standing there looking at the formation arrayed in the training yard, something about it triggered recognition, triggered memory of things he'd seen in combat zones but never on training facilities stateside. What's all the commotion? His voice carried professional irritation. I have 3 dogs with training injuries that need attention. Can we not have a circus in the middle of the facility while I'm trying to work? He stopped walking, stopped talking, just stood there staring at the defensive diamond with an expression that cycled from confusion to recognition to something approaching awe. What am I looking at? The question came out quiet, almost reverent. That's what we're trying to figure out, sir. Marcus's voice had lost all its earlier confidence, had become the voice of someone confronting something beyond his understanding and trying desperately to find a framework that would make it make sense. Derek appeared at Brandon's elbow, tablet clutched tight enough that his knuckles showed white. His voice dropped low and insinuating, meant for Brandon's ears, but carrying to those close enough to overhear. Sir, what if she's using illegal electronic devices we can't detect? Hidden ultrasonics outside our detection range? There are black market training tools from Eastern Europe, China, North Korea, designed specifically to compromise conditioning protocols and create vulnerability to foreign command structures. She could be running a penetration test on our security. She could be mapping our defensive capabilities. This could be a security breach we don't fully understand yet and won't understand until it's too late to counter. Brandon seized on the suggestion with visible relief. Finally, an explanation that fit his worldview. Finally, a framework that made sense. Finally, something actionable rather than inexplicable. Strip search. Female officer to conduct it. I want every inch of her and her equipment examined. I want every piece of clothing checked. Every pocket turned inside out. If she's carrying anything at all, I want it documented and cataloged and analyzed. Victoria's expression flickered with something like pleasure, like she'd been given permission to indulge impulses she usually had to restrain. I'll handle it personally. Come with me. She gestured toward the admin building with a smile that held no warmth. Let's see what our mysterious cleaning lady is really hiding under that uniform. Maya followed without protest, without resistance, without any visible emotion. The dogs held formation until she disappeared through the door, then broke and followed in perfect silence. A stream of muscle and fur flowing across the yard like water draining from a pool. 47 dogs moving with purpose and unity that shouldn't exist without explicit commands. 15 minutes later, Victoria returned alone. Her expression had shifted from pleased anticipation to something sour, something frustrated, something that suggested she'd hoped to find evidence and found nothing instead. Nothing. The word came out clipped, almost angry. She's clean, no devices, no treats, no drugs, no electronics, no chemicals. Just regulation underwear in a body that looks like it's been through a garbage disposal. What do you mean? Colonel Hartley asked, his first words since arriving, spoken quietly but carrying authority that made everyone within earshot turn to listen. Victoria shrugged with exaggerated carelessness. Scars, old ones, burns that look like they came from close proximity explosions. Surgical marks, the kind of thing you'd see on someone who's been in serious accidents. Multiple serious accidents. But nothing relevant to this situation. Nothing that explains how she's controlling the bugs. Sam stepped forward, his instructor badge catching morning light. At 65, he'd earned the right to speak his mind, regardless of rank protocols. Had earned respect through decades of competence and wisdom. Had earned the right to question without being questioned in return. Okay, if you're legitimate, if this is all just some bizarre coincidence, then let's test real skill. Basic handler competency. Disassemble an M4 carbine blindfolded. It was a power move. Weapon handling had nothing to do with K9 work, but it was a standard skill test for military personnel, a way to prove basic competency and discipline. Civilians couldn't do it. Maintenance workers definitely couldn't do it. And doing it blindfolded was a demonstration standard that separated instructors from students. That separated people who'd spent thousands of hours handling weapons from people who'd just gone through basic training. Petty Officer Jordan Brooks stood near the armory entrance with arms crossed. At 29 years old, he'd served one deployment to Afghanistan and considered himself experienced, considered himself capable of assessing competence in others. His brother had served with Naval Special Warfare and told him stories. Stories about operators with skills that seemed impossible, about handlers who could do things with tongs that defied explanation. But standing there looking at the maintenance worker in her torn uniform, he couldn't reconcile those stories with this reality. He muttered to Riley, his voice carrying skepticism and something like contempt. She won't be able to. That's advanced training. That's what we teach people after months of daily weapons handling. She's going to embarrass herself, and maybe we can all get back to actual work instead of this sideshow. Maya nodded once, extended her hand, palm up, fingers together, the universal gesture of readiness to receive. Marcus placed an M4 carbine in her grip, the weight settling into her hand with the kind of familiarity that comes from muscle memory built over thousands of repetitions. He tied a black cloth over her eyes, making sure the blindfold completely blocked her vision, making sure there was no possibility of cheating, no possibility of seeing through gaps or shadows. The training yard went quiet, 50-plus personnel watching, phones coming out, someone recording. The moment taking on weight beyond its immediate significance, taking on the quality of a test that mattered more than just mechanical competence. Maya's hands moved, 42 seconds to disassemble, every component separated with practiced economy that spoke to thousands of hours of repetition. Magazine release, bolt catch, charging handle, upper and lower receiver pins separated with the kind of precision that comes from doing it in darkness, in stress, in combat conditions where fumbling means dying. Buffer spring, bolt carrier group, each piece placed in precise order on the ground in front of her in a pattern that would allow instant reassembly without vision. 38 seconds to reassemble. Her fingers worked without hesitation, no fumbling, no false starts, no pauses to orient herself or remember sequence. Just smooth mechanical motion that flowed from muscle memory too deep to forget. When she finished, she performed a functions check, charging handle pulled to verify bolt movement, trigger pressed to verify firing mechanism. Safety selector tested through all positions to verify mechanical integrity. All by touch, and all without vision, and all with the casual competence of someone for whom this task had become as automatic as breathing. She removed the blindfold slowly, folded it precisely, handed the weapon back to Marcus without meeting his eyes, without any visible emotion, without any acknowledgement that she'd just done something that should have been impossible for someone with her supposed background. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched taut like a wire ready to snap, like everyone was waiting for someone else to explain what they'd just witnessed, to provide context that would make it make sense. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he took the rifle back. His voice came out hoarse, uncertain, like someone whose foundational assumptions had just been challenged and found wanting. That's instructor-level performance. That's what we teach in our advanced courses after 6 months of daily training. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 months. He paused, seeming to need the repetition to process what he'd seen. Who trained you? Where did you learn to do this? Maya's hands showed themselves in the gesture of returning the weapon. Calluses along the thumb web from thousands of magazine changes. Thickened skin on the fingertips from cleaning and maintaining weapons in field conditions. Scars across the knuckles from close quarters combat training. Uniform coverage suggesting repetitive impact rather than random injury. The kind of hands that belonged to someone who'd spent years doing violence professionally. She didn't answer Marcus's question. Instead, she removed the blindfold slowly, folded it precisely into a perfect square, held it out toward him with the same neutral expression she'd maintained throughout. Her eyes met his with that same flat assessment. Not hostile, not friendly, just evaluating, reading, cataloging reactions and responses for purposes only she understood. Then she turned and picked up her mop. The motion so casual it felt like deliberate dismissal, like everything that had just happened meant nothing, like demonstrating expert-level weapons handling while blindfolded was just another Tuesday morning task no more significant than mopping floors. Brandon's face had gone from purple to something darker, something that suggested cardiovascular crisis might be imminent. The veins in his temples pulsed visibly. His breathing had become audible, harsh, the sound of someone struggling to maintain control over rage that threatened to override rational thought. Answer the question. Where did you learn weapons handling? Who trained you? What unit were you assigned to? YouTube tutorials, sir. Maya's voice came out quiet, steady, completely sincere in tone, and utterly unconvincing in content. The kind of answer that was technically not a lie, but functionally operated as deflection, as evasion, as refusal to engage with the actual question being asked. A ripple of murmurs spread through the watching crowd like wind through tall grass. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered something about classified training that got cut off when the person next to them elbowed them in the ribs. The tension in the air became almost physical, almost visible. Nathan stepped forward, his medical bag hitting the ground with a heavy thud that made several people flinch. At 45 years old, he'd developed the kind of professional authority that made people listen when he spoke, made people trust his judgment, made people accept his assessments even when they didn't want to. Okay, fine, weapons training is one thing. Could be military background. Could be civilian shooting courses. Could be a lot of things. Let me try something in my field, something that can't be faked, something that requires specific knowledge that isn't available to the general public. He crossed his arms and fixed Maya with an evaluating stare. Scenario: military working dog shows signs of hypovolemic shock following training accident. Rapid breathing, pale gums, weak pulse, capillary refill time greater than 2 seconds. You're in the field, no veterinarian immediately available. Medevac inbound but 20 minutes out. What do you do? It was a trick question designed to expose the limits of her knowledge. Civilian first aid for dogs was basic. Keep them warm, keep them calm, get to a vet as quickly as possible. Maybe some rudimentary CPR if breathing stopped. But that was it. That was the extent of what civilians learned. Military field protocols were completely different. Combat veterinary medicine assumed resource scarcity in immediate threat environments, assumed that you might need to stabilize a casualty under fire, that you might need to perform procedures that would normally require veterinary supervision because waiting for proper medical care meant death, that you needed to know enough emergency medicine to keep a wounded warrior alive long enough to reach someone with more training and better equipment. Maya didn't pause, didn't hesitate, didn't show any indication that she needed to think about the answer. Just started speaking in the same quiet, steady voice she'd used for everything else. Establish airway patency, assess breathing rate and quality, check circulation via capillary refill time and pulse strength at femoral artery, elevate hindquarters 30 degrees to maintain cerebral perfusion, prevent heat loss with thermal blankets or body heat if blankets unavailable, establish intravenous access if qualified and supplies available, 18-gauge catheter and cephalic vein preferred, saphenous vein if cephalic access fails, administer crystalloid fluids if shock confirmed, lactated ringers or normal saline, Initial bolus 10 to 20 milliliters per kilogram body weight. Monitor for... She stopped. Her eyes flickered. Awareness crossing her face that she'd said too much, revealed too much, demonstrated knowledge that maintenance workers shouldn't possess, that most military personnel shouldn't possess, that only people with very specific training would have access to. Nathan's expression shifted from skeptical assessment to stunned recognition, from testing to understanding, from professional evaluation to something approaching shock. That's field trauma protocol. That's what we teach combat medics deploying with K9 units. That's not something you learn from Google. That's not something you pick up from watching veterinary shows on television. He moved closer, studying her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. That's protocol for handling casualties under fire when you can't evacuate immediately. When you're in hostile territory and the only option is stabilize and hold until extraction becomes possible. From the communications shack near the admin building, Petty Officer Willow Flynn looked up from her console where she'd been monitoring radio channels. The words floating across the yard penetrated her concentration, made her pause in the middle of logging a routine transmission. Field trauma protocol, K9 casualties. She knew those terms, knew them intimately. She'd been trained on those procedures during her combat deployment with a Marine unit in Afghanistan, had used them, had placed IV lines in wounded dogs while rounds snapped overhead, had performed emergency medicine in conditions that still gave her nightmares 3 years after returning stateside. She stood and moved to the window, watching the scene unfold in the training yard with growing fascination. Colonel Hartley moved forward from his observation position, his stride purposeful but not rushed, controlled. The movement of someone who'd made a decision and was now acting on it with full commitment. "Miss," his voice carried command presence without volume, the kind of authority that made people stand straighter without thinking about it. "What did you say your name was?" Maya set down her mop again. That same economical movement that wasted no energy, no excess motion, pure efficiency. "Maya, sir, Maya Cordero." Full name for the record. Maya Cordero, maintenance worker, employed here 3 months. Derek was already moving before Hartley finished speaking. Tablet in hand, fingers flying across the screen with practiced speed. His security training making him default to verification, to documentation, to building a case file that could be referenced and analyzed and used to make informed decisions. "I'll run her background, see what we're really dealing with. Cross-reference against all databases, military service, criminal history, foreign contacts, everything." He disappeared into the admin building, already pulling up search interfaces and typing queries that would spread across multiple classified and unclassified databases looking for any information connected to the name Maya Cordero. Jake Morrison appeared from the kennels, moving faster than his 65 years should have allowed. He'd been working with the morning feeding rotation when the commotion started, had ignored it initially because drama in the training yard was common enough to not warrant immediate attention. But when the noise level increased and the crowd kept growing, curiosity overcame routine. He was a legend among K9 handlers. 40 years in the field, had worked every major conflict from the first Gulf War through Afghanistan, had trained some of the best handlers currently operating, had retired 5 years ago but couldn't quite leave the work behind, kept coming back as a consultant, as a mentor, as someone who knew things that couldn't be learned from manuals. He stopped at the edge of the yard, squinting at Maya across the distance, his head tilted like a Ned hearing a familiar sound, but not quite able to identify the source. Recognition flickering in his weathered features like a light bulb with loose connection. "Something familiar about her," he muttered to himself. "Can't place it, but I know I've seen her before, somewhere under different circumstances." Victoria hadn't moved from her position near the admin building. Now she sighed dramatically, the sound carrying artificial patience stretched to breaking. "Oh, please." She's a janitor who watched some YouTube videos and happens to have good muscle memory. "Can we please move on? Some of us have actual responsibilities. Some of us have meetings to attend. Some of us have work that actually matters to the functioning of this facility." She checked her watch with exaggerated care. "I have a scheduling coordination session in 20 minutes, and I'd rather not smell like dog yard when I attend. Can we wrap this circus up and get back to real work? The casual contempt in her voice made several people wince visibly. Made Riley look at the ground with shame heating her cheeks, even though she'd done nothing wrong. Made Sam's jaw clench tight enough that the muscle jumped visibly. Brandon ignored her. His focus remained locked on Maya with the intensity of someone who'd invested too much authority in the confrontation to back down now. Who needed answers not just for tactical reasons, but for ego reasons. Who couldn't accept that a maintenance worker had somehow demonstrated capabilities that exceeded most of the trained personnel on his facility. I want to know how a cleaning lady knows SEAL medic protocols. I want to know why 47 trained military dogs refuse to leave her side. I want to know why you're standing here pretending to be someone you're not. And I want answers now. Derek emerged from the admin building at a giant tablet extended in front of him like an offering. His expression carried satisfaction. The look of someone who'd found what they were looking for, who'd solved the puzzle, who could now provide context that would make everything make sense. Got something, sir. Service record, Maya Cordero, United States Army Reserve, military occupational specialty, 88 Mike, motor transport operator, single deployment, Iraq 2011 to 2012, honorable discharge, nothing classified, nothing special operations. Nothing that would explain any of this. Brandon grabbed the tablet and scanned the information with visible hunger, looking for something, anything, some detail that would provide explanation, some piece of data that would restore order to the chaos. So you did serve. Why hide it? Why work maintenance? Why not mention military background when you applied for the position? Maya's expression didn't change. That same flat neutrality that gave away nothing. I didn't hide anything. You didn't ask. The application asked for employment history. I provided it. Nobody asked about military service specifically. Motor transport, Marcus said slowly, confusion thick in his voice. You drove trucks, convoy operations. That explains nothing. You don't learn K-9 handling driving supply routes. You don't learn advanced weapons manipulation. You don't learn combat veterinary medicine. Those skills don't overlap with motor transport operations at all. Sam pulled Marcus aside, his voice dropping low, but still carrying to those close enough to hear. The voice of experience speaking to youth. The voice of someone who'd seen enough to know that surface explanations rarely told the whole story. Something's wrong with this picture, that diamond formation she deployed. I've been training dogs for 28 years. I've worked with Army, Marines, Air Force, and Navy programs. Every special operations unit that uses K-9s, that formation isn't publicly documented anywhere. It's not in training manuals. It's not taught in handler courses. It's used by special operations units in classified deployments. It's something you only know if you've operated in extremely specific environments where that kind of protection was tactically necessary. He glanced back at Maya, his weathered face showing confusion and recognition, fighting for dominance. Motor transport doesn't get that training. Nobody gets that training unless they're operating with Tier 1 units in combat zones where threat could come from any direction simultaneously. Unless they've been in situations where defensive damage was the difference between living and dying. Lieutenant Commander Naomi Torres strode across the yard from the intelligence building. At 44 years old, she moved with the contained energy of someone who worked in classified spaces where everything mattered and nothing could be discussed. She held a tablet with bright red classification markings across the screen, the kind of markings that meant unauthorized viewing could result in federal prosecution. Her face carried professional seriousness, the expression of someone delivering information that would change the trajectory of whatever was happening. She went directly to Colonel Hartley, showed him the screen, whispered something that made his eyes widen, made his posture shift, made him go very still in the way that people do when processing information that doesn't fit their existing framework. Hartley shook his head slowly, disbelief mixing with dawning comprehension. Verify the photo, cross-reference with facial recognition. I need to be absolutely certain before we proceed. I need confirmation that what I'm seeing is actually what I'm looking at. Naomi nodded and stepped away, fingers already working the tablet, already initiating searches and comparisons and verification protocols that would either confirm or deny the impossible thing the data seemed to be suggesting. Hartley approached Maya with completely different body language than Brandon had used. Less confrontation, more caution. The approach of someone who'd just been told they might be dealing with something significantly more complicated than they'd initially assessed. Ma'am, I need to ask you directly, what unit were you actually assigned to during your deployment? Not the cover assignment, not the administrative record. What unit did you actually operate with? Before Maya could respond, before anyone could move, before the tension could resolve into whatever came next, the facility alarm screamed to life. 3 short bursts, sharp, urgent. The emergency signal that meant someone was in immediate danger. Nathan's radio crackled with urgent voices overlapping each other. Multiple people trying to transmit simultaneously. Panic audible under the professional terminology. Medical emergency, dog down at obstacle course, severe trauma, collapsed equipment, need veterinary response immediately, need it now. Nathan grabbed his bag and ran, his 45-year-old legs pumping hard across the training yard. Half the personnel followed. Instinct overriding curiosity. Training overriding the desire to see how the confrontation with Maya resolved. Brandon started after them, then turned back to keep eyes on Maya, torn between the emergency and the security concern. Unable to decide which deserved priority. He didn't need to worry about her running, she was already gone, sprinting toward the obstacle course with speed that seemed impossible for someone her size, for someone who'd been standing still moments before. The kind of acceleration that belongs to people who've trained their bodies to move from 0 to maximum velocity and heartbeats, who've learned that in combat, hesitation means death and speed means survival. The 47 dogs flowed after her in perfect formation, maintaining the defensive diamond even at full sprint, moving like a single organism with 47 bodies. The precision was hypnotic, unnatural, beautiful, and terrifying simultaneously. Sam watched them go, his weathered face showing something between awe and fear. I've never seen that before. Never in 4 decades of handling. Dogs don't maintain tactical formation during emergency response. The stress breaks discipline. The urgency overrides training. They should scatter, should run independently, should lose cohesion. He shook his head slowly. But those dogs aren't following training protocols. They're following her. They're maintaining formation because she's their pack leader, and pack leaders get protected even during crisis response. Marcus stood frozen, watching the dogs disappear around the corner of a building. Those dogs aren't following training. He repeated Sam's words like they were a revelation, like they explained everything and nothing simultaneously. They're following her. Everyone ran toward the obstacle course, following the sound of shouting, following the smell of blood that the wind carried back toward the training yard, following instinct that said when the alarm sounds, you respond. The scene that greeted them would shatter every assumption they'd made about the quiet woman with the mop. Rex, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a track record of perfect performance, lay trapped beneath a collapsed A-frame obstacle. The structure, designed to support up to 300 pounds, had failed catastrophically. Metal framework pinned his hindquarters. Blood spread across the dirt from a deep laceration on his left rear leg. His breathing came fast and shallow. His gums had already started losing color, pink fading to pale. The progression from healthy to shock happening in real time. Classic signs of traumatic shock advancing rapidly. Signs that meant without immediate intervention, Rex would die. Maybe in 5 minutes. Maybe in 3. Maybe in less time than that if the internal injuries were worse than the external bleeding suggested. Nathan skidded to a stop, medical bag hitting the ground. He dropped to his knees and reached for supplies, running through mental checklists, organizing his response, preparing to do what he'd done dozens of times in combat zones, what he'd trained for, what he was expert at. But Maya was already there, already kneeling beside Rex, already moving with purpose and precision that made Nathan freeze with his hand halfway to his medical kit. Her hands moved, not the fumbling of a civilian trying to help, not even the competent movements of someone with first aid training, not the careful, deliberate motions of someone following memorized protocols. Her hands moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd performed these exact actions under pressure so many times that conscious thought no longer factored into the equation. Muscle memory so deep it had become instinct. Training so thorough it had become part of her nervous system's automatic responses. 5 seconds. That's how long it took her to complete the primary assessment that should have taken 30 seconds minimum. Airway clear. She checked by gently opening Rex's mouth and visually confirming. No blood, no obstruction, no damage to tongue or throat visible. Breathing rapid but adequate. Her hand on his chest feeling the rise and fall. Counting respirations. 16 per minute. High but not critical. Circulation compromised. Her fingers on his femoral artery feeling the weak, thready pulse. Maybe 60 beats per minute. Should be 90 to 120. Should be strong and regular. This was weak and irregular. This was bad. She spoke without looking up, without taking her eyes off Rex, without breaking her assessment rhythm. Her voice had changed, no longer quiet and deferential, no longer the voice of someone trying to avoid attention. Command voice, the kind that makes people obey before thinking, the kind that carries absolute certainty, the kind that says, I know exactly what I'm doing and you need to trust me right now and question it later. I need pressure on the femoral artery, ice packs from medical, gauze, hemostatic agent, intravenous catheter kit, 18 gauge. Move now. People scattered to obey before their conscious minds registered they'd just taken orders from the maintenance worker. Before they thought about chain of command or authorization or whether she had any right to issue orders. Instinct recognizing competence. Training recognizing command presence. Bodies responding to authority that transcended rank. Nathan reached for his bag, professional instinct asserting itself. I'll handle the medical response. You need to step back and let me. No time. Maya already had the IV kit in her hand, already had the 18-gauge catheter out, already had alcohol swab ready. Her movements economical, efficient, no wasted motion. She found the cephalic vein on the first attempt. No palpating, no searching, no multiple needle sticks, just direct insertion based on anatomical knowledge and thousands of hours of practice. Had the line placed and secured in 12 seconds. Drew blood for hematocrit check even as she applied pressure to the wound site with her other hand. Her movements were ambidextrous. Left hand placing IV, right hand controlling bleeding. Both working simultaneously with equal skill. The kind of capability that only comes from training specifically designed to maintain function if one hand is compromised, if one arm is injured, if you need to work while holding a weapon or while applying pressure to your own wounds. She grabbed Nathan's radio without asking permission, without looking at him, without any acknowledgement that taking his equipment might be inappropriate. Just reached out and took it because she needed it and it was there. Switched it to a different frequency. A frequency that the dial shouldn't have been able to access. A frequency that required hardware modifications to reach. A frequency that nobody on base should have known existed. The encrypted channel reserved for Joint Special Operations Command. Tango 7 Mike requesting immediate medevac protocol for K9 casualty. Trauma consistent with penetrating wound and crush injury. Estimated blood loss 500 milliliters showing early decompensation. Capillary refill time 3 seconds. Heart rate 60. Respiratory rate 16. Coordinates 3, 2.7, 158, north 117.1563 west. Requesting priority extraction with trauma surgical capability. Advised status. In the communication shack, Willow Flynn's hands froze over her keyboard. The transmission coming through her monitor made her stop breathing. That frequency, that call sign, that protocol format. She'd heard it exactly once during her deployment, when a classified unit had crossed paths with her Marine convoy during a joint operation in Helmand Province. The operator had used that same terminology, that same clinical precision, that same compressed communication style that packed maximum information into minimum words. She grabbed her supervisor's arm hard enough to leave marks. Sir, that's a JSOC frequency, Joint Special Operations Command. That's not accessible to base personnel. That's not accessible to most of the military. That requires specialized communication equipment and encryption keys that are changed daily. How does she have access to that channel? How does she even know it exists? Nathan tried to take back his radio, professional territoriality asserting itself even in crisis. You can't use military emergency frequencies without proper authorization. You're contaminating the channel. You're violating communications protocols. You need to. Brandon arrived at the scene, pushing through the crowd that had gathered, his face still showing the anger from the confrontation in the training yard. His authority still invested in maintaining control over a situation that had long since escaped his ability to manage. What's happening? Who gave orders to initiate emergency protocols? This is my facility and I need to know. He saw Maya working on Rex, saw the IV line, saw the professional wound management, saw the blood on her hands, saw her using Nathan's radiator like she owned it. His hand shot out to grab her shoulder, to physically pull her away from the dog, to reassert his authority through force since words had failed to establish it. Stop. You're not authorized to provide veterinary care. You're contaminating the treatment. Step away before you make this worse. Step away now. He yanked her backward, hard, using force meant to move her bodily away from Rex, using strength to overcome resistance. Maya's shirt caught on the collapsed obstacle frame, on the sharp edge of metal where the weld had failed and left jagged steel exposed. Old fabric, worn thin from months of industrial washing, weakened by repeated exposure to bleach in hot water and the mechanical stress of commercial laundry equipment. It tore. Not just a small rip, not just a seam separating. The entire back panel separated from collar to hem. The sound of fabric giving way audible even over the shouting and the radio traffic and the ambient noise of 50 people trying to respond to an emergency. The world stopped. Not metaphorically, not in the poetic sense of time seeming to slow during significant moments, literally stopped. Every person within visual range froze mid-motion, mouths hanging open, eyes locked, hands reaching for phones, bodies turning to get better viewing angles, breathing suspended, hearts seeming to pause between beats. Maya's back was exposed from shoulders to waist, exposed completely. Exposed in a way that couldn't be hidden or minimized or explained away. Her back was a canvas of ink and scar tissue, telling stories that most people spend their entire lives never experiencing. At the top, spanning her shoulder blades, the Naval Special Warfare trident dominated the visual field. The SEAL insignia that every operator earns after surviving 24 months of the hardest training in the American military. BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. The course that starts with 200 candidates and graduates, maybe 20. The course that breaks people physically and mentally and spiritually. The course that separates those who want to be warriors from those who actually are warriors. But this trident was modified, customized, unique in ways that made it clear this wasn't just standard issue. A canine paw print integrated into the eagle's body. The talons gripping not just the anchor, but also a tactical dog lead. The anchor wrapped with what looked like paracord, details that didn't exist in regulation SEAL insignias, details that spoke to specialization, to unique assignment, to something beyond standard SEAL operations. Below the trident, 12 paw prints arranged in 3 rows of 4, each print the size of a silver dollar, each one rendered in different ink. Some faded to gray with age, some still dark and fresh looking, some with scar tissue cutting through them, disrupting the lines, creating texture that spoke to injury, to trauma, to damage sustained after the tattoos had been applied. Each paw print contained a date written in tiny script that would require getting close to read clearly. Years visible, even from a distance. 2009, 2011, 2013. Dates spanning more than a decade, each one marking something, commemorating something, remembering something that mattered enough to mark permanently on skin that would carry the memory forever. Below the paw prints, geographic coordinates rendered in precise military format, the kind of notation that marks specific locations with accuracy measured in meters. 34.5333 degrees north, 69.1333 degrees east, 33.3152 degrees north, 44.3661 degrees but from east. More coordinates below those. 5 sets total, each one marking a place, a location, a point on Earth where something happened that deserved permanent remembrance. Anyone with basic geographic knowledge would recognize some of them instantly. Kabul, Afghanistan, Baghdad, Iraq. The others less immediately identifiable but clearly marking locations that held significance. And at the base of Maya's spine, below all the other ink, script rendered in a style that looked like it had been carved rather than tattooed. Letters that seemed to have more depth than ink should create, as if the words had been cut into her skin and then filled with pigment. Silent service, eternal watch, Ghost Unit 7. Beneath all the tattoos, visible through them in places, crossing over them in others, white lines of scar tissue created a topographic map of damage. Surgical marks with the precise spacing that comes from medical intervention. Shrapnel extraction scars with the random distribution that comes from explosive force, sending metal fragments through flesh in patterns determined by physics rather than design. Burn scars with the texture that comes from being too close to something very hot for too long. The kind of scars that accumulate over years of putting yourself between danger and the people you are protecting. The kind of scars that tell stories about choices made under pressure, about missions completed despite injury, about surviving things that kill most people who experience them. The silence lasted 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then Riley Jackson gasped loud enough that the sound carried across the entire obstacle course area, loud enough to break the spell, loud enough to restart time. "Oh my God!" Colonel James Hartley's reaction was instantaneous and absolute. His back straightened to parade ground attention. Perfect posture, perfect form, the kind of bearing that gets drilled into people during basic training and becomes automatic over decades of service. His heels came together with audible impact. His right hand rose in the sharpest, most precise salute any of the witnesses had ever seen. The kind of salute reserved for dignitaries, for heroes, for people who'd earned respect through blood and sacrifice and service that transcended normal understanding. His hand trembled, visibly, the shake of someone whose emotions were overwhelming their physical control. His voice cracked when he spoke, the word coming out broken, reverent, shocked. "Master Chief." The title hit like a physical shockwave rolling across the obstacle course. Master Chief Petty Officer, the highest enlisted rank in the Naval Special Warfare community, a rank that requires minimum 15 years of exemplary service to achieve, a rank that carries weight beyond the insignia, beyond the pay grade, a rank that means something to people who understand what it takes to earn it. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The world had narrowed to this single moment, to the woman kneeling in the dirt with blood on her hands and her entire back exposed, to the tattoos that told stories most people only heard about third hand, to the scars that mapped a career most people couldn't imagine surviving. Marcus Chen dropped his clipboard. The sound of it hitting the ground seemed unnaturally loud in the absolute silence. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. His brain struggling to reconcile the maintenance worker he'd dismissed for 3 months with the evidence written across her back in ink and scar tissue. "Ghost Unit," he finally managed to whisper. "But those are legends. Stories we tell in handler school. They don't actually exist. They can't exist." His voice climbed an octave on the last sentence, desperation audible in the rising pitch. The need for someone to tell him this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, that maintenance workers didn't turn out to be operators from units so classified that most military personnel had never heard of them. Victoria Sterling had gone white as paper, all the color draining from her face like someone had opened a valve. Her perfectly styled hair and crisp uniform suddenly looked ridiculous. Costume rather than authority. She backed away slowly, one hand pressed to her mouth, hyperventilating audibly. The casual contempt she'd wielded so easily replaced by something approaching terror. She turned and walked away, fast, nearly running, heading toward the admin building with her shoulders hunched, with shame radiating from every step. Within 24 hours, she would submit a resignation letter citing personal reasons. Everyone would understand those personal reasons meant she couldn't face working alongside someone she'd treated with such profound contempt, someone whose shoes she wasn't worthy to polish. Nathan Pierce sat down his medical kit with careful precision. straightened from his crouch beside Rex, brought himself to attention despite the dirt and blood and chaos, saluted with the kind of respect that comes from recognizing someone who'd operated at levels he'd only supported from the rear. Master Chief Petty Officer, I apologize for my disrespect, ma'am. I should have recognized the signs, should have understood what I was seeing. I have no excuse for my blindness. His voice carried steady conviction, but his eyes showed the shock of reassessment. Processing every interaction he'd had with Maya over the past 3 months, every time he'd walked past her mopping his clinic floor, every time he'd treated her like she was invisible, every casual dismissal now revealed as profound failure of awareness. Derek Walsh had dropped his tablet entirely. The screen shattered when it hit the ground, but he didn't seem to notice. His face cycled through expressions too fast to catalog individually. Shock, denial, horror, understanding. His mouth moved silently as if he was talking to himself, working through implications, consequences. I ran a background check on a DevGru operator, he finally said out loud, voice climbing toward panic. Oh no, no. I accessed classified personnel files without proper authorization. I queried databases I shouldn't have touched. I just committed federal crimes, multiple federal crimes. He looked around wildly as if expecting military police to materialize and arrest him on the spot. Around the perimeter of the obstacle course, 50-plus personnel responded in waves. Some saluted immediately, military bearing overriding shock. Some just stared, unable to process what they were seeing. Some pulled out phones to photograph or record, documenting the moment because their brains couldn't quite believe it was real without evidence. The screenshot that would circulate through military social media for months was being captured in real time. The image that would become legend. Maya Cordero kneeling in the dirt with her back exposed. The 12 paw prints visible. The coordinates clear. The inscription about Ghost Unit readable, even in the photographs taken from distance. Sam Bridger stood with tears streaming down his weathered face. He didn't salute because civilians don't salute military personnel, but he stood at attention with his right hand over his heart. The gesture of respect that belongs to veterans who understand service, who understand sacrifice, who understand what those tattoos represented. I knew I recognized something, his voice broke. 28 years training handlers, and I've never seen anything like this. You're real. Ghost Unit is real. All the stories we thought were exaggerated or fictional or propaganda, they're real. Jake Morrison pushed through the crowd, moving faster than his 65 years should have allowed. Adrenaline overriding the complaints of joints that had logged too many miles. He stopped 10 feet from Maya, his entire body shaking. Fallujah, 2010, hotel company got pinned down in the industrial district. His voice came out hoarse, thick with emotion he wasn't trying to hide. 6 handlers, 6 dogs, ambush from 3 sides. We lost. He couldn't finish. His hands covered his face, shoulders shaking with sobs he had held back for 15 years. Everyone said the ghost handler went in. Everyone said she got 3 handlers out. They said 6 dogs died holding the line while she evacuated the wounded. They said she carried a 90-pound Malinois 200 meters through enemy fire because she refused to leave anyone behind. He looked up at Maya, tears on his cheeks, recognition absolute in his expression. That was you, holy God, that was you. Jordan Brooks stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper, his earlier skepticism completely gone, replaced by something approaching awe. My brother, Petty Officer Marcus Brooks. He served with Naval Special Warfare support activity. He told me stories about a handler who went into ambush zones to extract wounded. He said she carried handlers and dogs out of situations where everyone else said extraction was impossible. He said she took shrapnel meant for her team. He said she had to be physically restrained from going back for casualties because she refused to accept that anyone was beyond saving. Tears ran down his face. His voice broke. He said her call sign was Ghost because nobody ever saw her coming, and nobody could believe what she'd done after she left. He said she moved like smoke, like she wasn't quite real, like she was something between human and legend. Naomi Torres pushed through the crowd with her tablet extended toward Colonel Hartley. On the screen, a classified file glowed with red warning markings. Text marked, classified eyes only clearance level Omega. A photograph filled the top third of the screen. Younger Maya in full combat gear. SEAL trident visible on her chest. K9 vest over tactical armor. Face partially obscured by dust and tactical goggles, but clearly the same person kneeling in the dirt before them. Her expression in the photo hard, alert, alive with the kind of intensity that belongs to people operating in environments where mistakes have permanent consequences. Hartley took the tablet with shaking hands. Read aloud in a voice loud enough for everyone within 30 feet to hear. Loud enough that people at the edges of the crowd went silent to catch his words. Master Chief Petty Officer Maya Cordero, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, K9 Unit Handler and Lead Instructor, 12 combat deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, locations redacted. He paused, his voice strengthening as he read the decorations. Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star with Valor device, Navy Cross. He had to stop, had to clear his throat, had to steady himself before he could continue reading. Navy Cross, 3rd highest decoration for valor in combat, awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty while under enemy fire, resulting in rescue of multiple wounded personnel and K9 partners at extreme personal risk. The weight of those words pressed down on everyone present. Navy Cross, fewer than 7,000 had been awarded in the entire history of the United States military, reserved for actions that went beyond normal heroism, beyond normal sacrifice, for moments when someone looked at impossible odds and decided to act anyway because lives depended on action more than survival. Maya hadn't moved. Her hands still maintained pressure on Rex's wound. Her focus still locked on keeping the dog alive, even with her entire identity exposed, even with 50 people staring at her back, even with the privacy she'd spent 3 months building completely shattered. The mission still came first. Rex still needed her attention more than her dignity needed protecting. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried clearly in the suspended silence. He needs surgical intervention within 30 minutes, preferably sooner. Are we going to stand here talking? Or are we going to save his life? The spell broke. Nathan moved instantly, taking over the medical care with newfound respect and efficiency, his hands working alongside Maya's rather than trying to replace her, recognizing her expertise, deferring to her assessment while contributing his own skills. 2 trainers carefully lifted the collapsed obstacle. Another stabilized Rex's spine with practiced care. Within 90 seconds, they had him on a gurney and moving toward the veterinary clinic at a controlled run, fast enough to matter, careful enough to avoid causing additional injury. Maya stood slowly. Both dogs, Valor and the others who'd maintained their protective formation throughout the emergency, rose with her. Blood covered her hands and forearms. Her torn shirt hung loose, the full tattoo still visible to everyone present. She looked at Colonel Hartley with those brown eyes that revealed nothing about what she was thinking or feeling. Permission to clean up and return to duty, sir. Hartley stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Master Chief, we had no idea you were here. If I'd known, if any of us had known, you would have been treated with the respect your rank and service deserved. This situation never would have. If you'd known, you would have treated me differently. Maya cut him off, her voice still quiet but carrying an edge now, a hardness. That's why I didn't advertise. I came here to work, not to be saluted. I came here to be around dogs without the weight of command, without the responsibility of sending them into situations where they might die. I came here to be invisible. Brandon Hawk had been standing frozen since Hartley's salute. Now he found his voice, found words even though they came out broken and uncertain. But why? Why work maintenance? Why hide your identity? You're a Master Chief. You're a SEAL. He gestured helplessly at her back, at the evidence of service that transcended anything he had accomplished in his own career. Your ghost unit. Why would someone with your background choose to mop floors? Maya looked at him with those brown eyes that gave nothing away, held his gaze until he shifted uncomfortably, until the question started to feel like an intrusion rather than reasonable inquiry. Because real warriors don't advertise, Lieutenant Commander. Because the work matters more than the recognition. and because someone needs to clean up after people who spend all their time reminding others of their rank. The barb landed like a physical blow. Brandon flinched, his face flushing red then draining pale, the implicit criticism cutting deeper than any explicit reprimand could have. Maya turned away from him, turned away from all of them, started walking toward the maintenance building with deliberate steps. The 47 dogs fell into formation around her. Not the defensive diamond anymore. Now they moved like an honor guard, flanking her on both sides, moving at her pace, maintaining perfect spacing. Not because she commanded them, because they chose to. Valor walked directly beside her, his head level with her hand. Every few steps, his nose touched her palm, a gesture of connection, of recognition, of something that transcended training and entered the realm of partnership that couldn't be taught or commanded, that could only be built through trust and time and shared experience. The crowd parted as she walked. Some saluted, some just watched in silence, all of them reassessing, reevaluating, understanding that everything they'd assumed about hierarchy and worth and who deserved respect had been fundamentally flawed. Riley stood with tears streaming down her face, not bothering to wipe them away, not ashamed of the emotion, just overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd witnessed, by the gap between who Maya had appeared to be and who she actually was. I questioned her, Marcus said quietly, his voice thick with shame. I challenged her to prove herself with weapons handling. I gave her tests designed to make her fail so I could feel superior. I treated her like she was less than me because she wore a maintenance uniform instead of instructor credentials. Sam Bridger put a hand on his shoulder, the gesture heavy with understanding. We all did. That's the point. She could have pulled rank at any moment, could have shut down every challenge with 2 words. Master Chief, but she didn't. She let us make fools of ourselves until circumstances forced the truth into the open, until her shirt tore and the evidence it became impossible to ignore. He watched Maya disappear into the maintenance building, the dogs flowing in behind her like water finding its level. That's what separates real operators from people who just wear the uniform. Real operators don't need to prove anything. They already know what they're worth. They've already paid the price. They've already earned respect in ways that don't require announcement or advertisement. They've already done the things that matter, and they carry the proof in scars and memories rather than ribbons and medals. Hartley still held Naomi's tablet, still stared at Maya's classified file, at the service record that contained 12 deployments, at the decorations that marked extraordinary service, at the details that were redacted even with his security clearance, at the evidence of a career spent doing things that would never appear in history books. He made a decision, pulled out his phone, dialed a number from memory. This is Colonel Hartley, Naval Base Coronado K-9 facility. I need a direct line to Naval Special Warfare Command. Priority contact. Authorization code 77 Delta, Mike 3. He paused, listening. I need to know if Master Chief Petty Officer Maya Cordero is still technically on active reserve status. I need to know if there's any way we can officially bring her back into the training program. And I need to know... He stopped. I need to know if anyone's been looking for her. Because someone with her skills and experience doesn't just disappear into a maintenance job without a reason. Either she's running from something or she's hiding from something. Either way, we need to know what. Naomi nodded and moved away, already placing calls, already pulling files, already initiating the kind of investigation that would answer questions while raising others. Jordan approached Hartley cautiously, respectfully, the kind of approach that belongs to junior personnel addressing senior officers about sensitive subjects. Sir, permission to speak? Granted. My brother told me something else about the ghost handler. He said she retired because she lost her entire team in a mission that went sideways. He said 6 dogs died in one operation and she couldn't... His voice broke. She couldn't handle training new partners after that. He said every dog she sees now carries the memory of the ones she lost. He said she protects herself by not caring as much, by not trusting as deeply, by maintaining distance because closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability means pain. Hartley looked toward the maintenance building where Maya had disappeared, understanding blooming in his expression. That would explain why she's here, why she took a job that keeps her close to Maz without having to form operational partnerships, why she works in the background, why she hides. He was quiet for a moment, the weight of command showing in the lines around his eyes. She's grieving, and we just forced her back into the spotlight she was hiding from. We just stripped away the privacy she needed to heal. We just made her pain public. The realization settled over the assembled personnel like fog. The understanding that what had seemed like revelation might actually be violation. That exposing Maya's identity might have done more harm than good regardless of intentions. In the veterinary clinic, Nathan worked on Rex with focused intensity. The IV line Maya had placed remained in position. Perfect placement, perfect technique. The kind of work that spoke to thousands of hours of practice. The wound required 22 sutures. Internal injuries were less severe than initial assessment suggested. Prognosis was good. Rex would make a full recovery because someone with combat trauma experience had been there a career in the critical first minutes, had known exactly what to do, had done it without hesitation or error, had saved a life that might otherwise have been lost. The hours progressed in strange, subdued fashion. Word spread through the base like wildfire. By 1400 hours, personnel from other departments were finding excuses to walk past the maintenance building, hoping for a glimpse, wanting to see if the stories were true, wanting to confirm that a living legend had been working among them for 3 months without anyone knowing. Maya didn't emerge. She stayed inside, presumably cleaning, doing the job she'd been hired to do. But the 47 dogs knew. They positioned themselves around the maintenance building in a loose perimeter, not blocking access, just present, watching. A silent honor guard for someone they recognized as worthy of protection. At 16:30 hours, a black sedan arrived at the main gate. No insignia, no markings, just government plates and windows tinted dark enough to prevent anyone from seeing inside. It drove directly to the maintenance building and parked. Rear Admiral Elena Cross emerged, two-star flag officer, commander of the entire Naval Special Warfare facility. At 52 years old, she carried herself with authority that came from competence rather than rank. She'd earned her position through demonstrated excellence, through making hard decisions, through understanding that leadership meant service rather than privilege. She didn't announce her presence to the facility staff, didn't demand attention, simply walked to the maintenance building and knocked on the door like any visitor seeking entry rather than a flag officer who could have commanded it. Maya answered, still in her torn uniform, still covered in dried blood from Rex, her face carefully neutral when she saw who stood outside. Admiral Cross saluted, held it until Maya returned the gesture with precision that spoke to decades of military bearing. Master Chief Cordero, a word if you're willing. Maya stepped outside. Both dogs rose with her, Valor and Rex Legacy positioning themselves at her sides. The Admiral's eyes flickered to them briefly, recognition in her gaze, understanding that these weren't just dogs but partners. Your service record is still sealed above my clearance level, the Admiral said quietly. That tells me things I can't officially acknowledge. But it also tells me that you're someone we need here. Someone who could reshape how we train the next generation of handlers and canine operators. Maya's expression didn't change. That same careful neutrality. I'm here to work maintenance, ma'am. You're here to hide. The Admiral's voice was gentle but firm. And I understand why. I've read the parts of your record I have access to. I know about Kandahar. I know you lost your team. I know you blame yourself even though the after-action report cleared you of any wrongdoing and credited you with preventing a complete catastrophe. Maya's jaw tightened, the only sign that the words had impact. The Admiral continued, her voice carrying respect that transcended rank. I'm not ordering you to do anything. You've given enough, more than anyone should be asked to give. But I'm asking you to consider something. She gestured toward the training yard where personnel were slowly returning to normal operations. Those 47 dogs, 12 of them you personally trained before you retired. 35 of them are descended from dogs you trained or dogs that served alongside your teams. They remember, not consciously, perhaps, but genetically, behaviorally. You're part of their lineage. You're written into their DNA in ways that matter. Maya looked at the peaks positioned around the building, at Valor and Rex Legacy standing beside her, at the evidence of connection that went beyond simple training protocols. The Admiral's voice strengthened slightly. We're losing institutional knowledge, Master Chief. The old ways, the methods that actually work versus the methods that look good on paper. I have trainers with impeccable credentials who can't inspire dogs the way you did in 5 minutes this morning. I have handlers graduating who will deploy without understanding the reality of combat canine operations, because everyone who really knows is either dead or retired or hiding in maintenance closets. She paused, let the words settle. I'm offering you a position, senior master trainer. Design your own curriculum, set your own terms, name your own price. You'll have complete autonomy, no interference, no oversight beyond basic safety protocols. You build what you think needs building, and we support it. I don't need money, Maya said quietly. I work maintenance because the pay is enough and the job is simple. Then do it for them. The Admiral pointed at the dogs. Do it because the next generation of handlers deserves to learn from someone who actually understands the bond, who understands what it is, who understands that these aren't tools to be used, but warriors to be honored. She took a step closer, her voice dropping lower, more personal. Do it because somewhere right now there's a kid fresh out of handler school about to deploy into a situation where his life will depend on a dog he barely knows. And maybe, just maybe, if you teach his instructors the right way, if you share what you know, if you turn your pain into purpose, that kid comes home alive. That kid and his dog both make it back. That partnership survives because you were willing to teach instead of hide. Maya closed her eyes, the weight of the Admiral's words pressing down like physical force. The Admiral saluted again, held it for 3 seconds, then turned to leave, paused at her car door. For what it's worth, Master Chief, thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for reminding all of us what true humility looks like in a warrior, what it means to serve without needing recognition, what it costs to carry the weight you have carried and keep moving forward anyway. She drove away, leaving Maya standing in the doorway of the maintenance building, surrounded by dogs who refused to leave her side, facing a decision she wasn't ready to make. Before she could move, before she could process the offer, before she could retreat back into the building and try to pretend the day hadn't happened, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Not a simple vibration, a specific pattern. 3 short pulses, 2 long, 1 short. The pattern taught in classified communications training. The pattern that meant operational notification. The pattern that belonged to a life she'd tried to leave behind. Maya pulled out the phone. Unknown number. Scrambled identifier. The kind of call that made her heart rate spike even though she'd been retired for 3 years. The kind of call that meant someone somewhere had decided she was still an asset worth using. She answered, Cordero. The voice on the other end was distorted, run through encryption layers that made it sound mechanical, distant, inhuman in its lack of emotional inflection. Ghost 7, we have a situation. Maya's entire posture changed. Her shoulders squared, her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. Her eyes scanned the area with tactical awareness that had become automatic during 12 deployments, every instinct screaming that she needed to secure her position before continuing this conversation. I'm retired. So you've said 3 times now, according to my records. But this isn't a request for service. This is a notification. Rex Legacy is ready for deployment. Maya looked down at the German shepherd standing beside her, at the dog who'd been training in classified programs while she'd been mopping floors, at the warrior who carried genetics and training that made him valuable to operations she no longer wanted to think about. I'm not going back. Understood, but you need to be aware of the situation. Ethiopia, Addis Ababa region, 6 humanitarian workers being held by militant faction. High-value target requiring specialized extraction. The voice paused. Let the information settle. Let Maya process what was being said and what wasn't being said. 3 of them are children. The words hit like physical blows, like bullets penetrating their armor, like the kind of information designed to overcome resistance through moral weight rather than authority. Intelligence indicates 48 hours before execution for propaganda purposes. You're the only handler with regional operational experience. You're the only one who's worked with Rex Legacy's bloodline in that specific terrain. You're the only one those dogs will follow into environment where one mistake means everyone dies. Maya's finger hovered over the disconnect button, her mind racing through calculations, through assessments, through the kind of decision tree that belongs to people who've had to make impossible choices under pressure. I know what you're thinking, the voice continued, still mechanical, still emotionless, just delivering facts. You've given enough. You've lost enough. Walk away and nobody will judge you. You've earned the right to say no. You've paid your dues. You're owed peace. The voice paused again, longer this time. But somewhere in Ethiopia right now, there are 3 children who don't know they have 48 hours left to live. 3 children whose parents are humanitarian workers trying to make the world better. 3 children who will die for propaganda purposes unless someone intervenes. And the only person who might be able to change that is standing in a maintenance building, trying to pretend she's not still a warrior. Maya closed her eyes. Her free hand dropped to Valor's head. The dog leaned into her touch. Unwavering trust in the gesture. Complete faith that whatever she decided would be the right decision because she was pack leader, and pack leaders make the calls that keep the pack alive. The world narrowed to this moment, this choice, this impossible decision between the safety of anonymity and the weight of capability, between the trauma she was trying to heal and the lives she might be able to save, between the person she wanted to be and the person she'd been trained to be. She opened her eyes, looked at the facility that had given her shelter for 3 months, looked at the dogs who'd protected her when her cover was blown, looked at Valor who'd chosen her despite everything, looked at Rex Legacy who carried the bloodline of warriors who'd served before him, brought the phone back to her ear. Send coordinates. She disconnected, stood in the doorway for one more moment, processing the magnitude of what she'd just agreed to. The weight of stepping back into a life she'd spent 3 months trying to leave behind. Looked at Valor. You're staying here this time. I need you to wait for me. Can you do that? The dog's tail dropped, his ears flattened slightly, understanding in his eyes that something was happening, that she was leaving, that he couldn't follow. I'll come back, Maya said quietly, kneeling to look him in the eyes. I promise. I'll come back. The 72 hours that followed blurred together in a chaos of preparation and departure. Maya worked with Rex Legacy in the classified training area, running scenarios, testing responses, building the kind of synchronization that only comes from intensive focused practice. She emerged at odd hours, always covered in sweat, always moving with purpose that suggested the weight of impending deployment pressing down. Riley tried to approach her once, caught her at 1900 hours near the equipment shed. Master Chief, I know you're busy, but I just wanted to say... Maya stopped, turned, her eyes no longer flat but sharp, focused, the eyes of someone preparing for a combat. Say it fast. Riley swallowed hard. I want to learn from you. When you get back from wherever you're going, I want to understand what you understand about K9 operations. I want to be better. Maya studied her, really looked at her, saw something in the young seaman's face that reminded her of herself 20 years ago. Hungry, determined, naive about what that determination would cost. You sure about that? Because what I do, what I've done, it changes you. You can't unsee things, can't unknow things. The bond you form with a working dog in combat isn't like anything you've experienced. And when you lose them, she paused. When you lose them, pieces of you go with them that you never get back. Riley didn't flinch. I understand, Master Chief. No, you don't. But maybe that's okay. Nobody understands until they live it. Maya reached out and adjusted Riley's collar, straightened her uniform with practiced efficiency, a gesture of mentorship, of acceptance. When I get back, we'll talk, really talk, about what it means to be a handler, about sacrifice and partnership and the weight of putting a dog in harm's way because the mission requires it. Tears appeared in Riley's eyes. Thank you, Master Chief. Don't thank me yet. You might hate what I teach you. On the 3rd day at 0500 hours, a black SUV pulled up to the auxiliary entrance. Maya threw her duffel bag in the back. Rex Legacy jumped in beside her without hesitation. His eyes alert, his body language communicating readiness, understanding that they were going to work. Valor tried to follow. Maya caught him, both hands on his face. looking into his eyes with intensity that made the dog go still. "Not this time, buddy. You stay here. Protect them. I'll come back. I promise I'll come back." Valor whined, low in his throat, a sound of distress, of not understanding why he couldn't follow, why Pack was being separated. "I promise," Maya said again, her voice breaking slightly. "Wait for me." She climbed into the SUV, the door closed. The vehicle drove away toward Naval Air Station North Island, toward a plane that officially didn't exist on any manifest, toward Ethiopia and 6 hostages in 48 hours that had already started counting down. Valor sat at the gate, watching until the vehicle disappeared. Then he walked back to the maintenance building and lay down at the door, waiting. The waiting nearly destroyed him. Day 1, he paced the kennel, refused food, sat at the maintenance building door for hours. Day 3, Marcus tried training sessions. Valor obeyed mechanically, no spirit, no engagement, just going through motions because his training said to obey commands even when his heart wasn't in it. Day 7, he stopped pacing, just lay at the kennel entrance, staring at nothing, the light in his eyes beginning to dim. Day 14, Nathan examined him, found nothing physically wrong. This was emotional distress. This was a dog grieving for his handler, for his pack leader who'd left and might not return. "I've seen this before," Sam said quietly, standing beside Valor's kennel. "When handlers are killed in action, their dogs go through this. They wait, they watch, they hope. And when enough time passes without their person returning, something in them shuts down. It breaks them in ways that are hard to fix." "Will he recover?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with concern. "Depends on whether she comes back, and when." Sam reached through the kennel fence, touched Valor's head gently. The dog didn't react. Dogs don't understand deployment. They understand present or absent, here or gone. Every day she's away, Valor loses a little more faith that she'll return, loses a little more of the light that makes him who he is. Riley spent every off-duty hour sitting with Valor, talking softly, reminding him that Maya had promised to return, that warriors keep their promises, that he needed to hold on just a little longer. But by day 21, even Riley was starting to lose hope. Then day 23 arrived, 1400 hours, Hartley's phone rang. Unknown number, encrypted line. "Colonel Hartley speaking. Sir, this is Master Chief Cordero requesting permission to return to base." Hartley nearly dropped the phone, relief flooding through him so powerfully it made his hand shake. "Master Chief, where are you? Are you safe? We've been—" "North Island, just landed. I have Rex Legacy with me, requesting immediate transport to facility and access to kennels." "Granted, sending vehicle now, Master Chief. The hostages?" "6 rescued, 0 casualties on our side, mission complete. I'll brief you if you have clearance, otherwise it stays classified." "Understood. Welcome home, Master Chief." Hartley hung up, grabbed his radio. "All personnel, Master Chief Cordero returning to base within the hour. Minimal disruption. Give her space. Do not crowd her. Let her reconnect with her team and decompress. That is all." The message rippled through the facility. People paused in their work, exchanged glances. The legend was coming home. Riley was in the kennels when she heard. She went immediately to Valor. "Did you hear that? She's coming back. I told you, she promised and she's keeping that promise." For the first time in 3 weeks, Valor's ears perked up. His head lifted. His nose tested the air like he might catch her scent across the miles. The SUV arrived at 15:20 hours. Maya climbed out first. She looked different, thinner, the weight loss visible in how her civilian clothes hung loose on her frame. Dark circles under her eyes spoke to nights without sleep, to stress and adrenaline, and the kind of operational tempo that grinds people down to bare essentials. But she was alive, whole, walking under her own power. Rex Legacy emerged second. He was not the same dog who'd left 23 days ago. This dog had been to war, really been to war, not training, not exercises, actual combat where the rounds were real and the consequences permanent. A jagged scar across his right shoulder, fresh enough that the fur hadn't fully grown back. The kind of mark that comes from shrapnel or a bullet graze. The kind of injury that speaks to being too close to an explosion or too exposed during a firefight. He moved differently now, with careful confidence that belongs to warriors who've learned that survival requires constant vigilance. His eyes scanned the facility with tactical awareness, reading angles, assessing threats, never fully relaxing because combat had taught him that relaxation means vulnerability, and vulnerability means death. This was a dog who'd killed to protect, who tracked enemies through hostile territory, who'd done the things that working dogs do in war zones and carried the weight of those actions in ways that would never fully fade. Across the yard, Valor lifted his head. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Then both dogs moved, not running frantically, not rushing without control, walking with deliberate purpose. The movement of soldiers returning from patrol, of warriors recognizing brothers who'd shared experience that couldn't be explained to those who hadn't been there. When they met in the center of the yard, they stood side by side, shoulders touching, facing the same direction like they were on watch together, like they were covering each other's sectors, like they understood something about partnership that transcended words. Two halves of one unit, two parts of the same legacy. And in that moment of contact, something in Valor changed. The light returned to his eyes, not gradually, not slowly, like someone flipping a switch, like hope that had been dimming suddenly reignited with full intensity. His posture straightened, his tail lifted. The engagement that had been missing for 23 days came flooding back because his pack leader had returned, because the promise had been kept, because faith had been rewarded instead of betrayed. Maya walked toward them slowly, each step looking like it cost her something. Not physical pain, emotional weight, the burden of what she'd done, what she'd seen, what she'd had to become again after 3 months trying to be someone different. When she reached the dogs, she dropped to her knees between them. Both animals pressed against her, not frantically seeking attention, solidly anchoring her, grounding her, reminding her through physical contact that she was home, that she was safe, that the mission was complete, and she could finally let down the wall she'd needed to survive. Maya wrapped her arms around both dogs, closed her eyes, let the tears come. Let 23 days of held tension release in shaking shoulders and silent sobs that racked her frame. Nobody approached. Nobody interrupted. The entire facility seemed to understand that this moment was sacred, that what they were witnessing was the reunion of warriors who'd survived things that would break most people, that this was healing happening in real time. When Maya finally stood, she'd pulled herself together, become Master Chief Petty Officer Maya Cordero again instead of just Maya, the warrior instead of the woman trying to hide from being a warrior. She looked across the yard, saw Marcus, Sam, Nathan, Jordan, Jake, Riley, all keeping respectful distance, all clearly wanting to approach but honoring her need for space. She raised one hand. Small wave. Acknowledgement. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for caring. Thank you for understanding. Then she walked toward the classified training area, both dogs flanking her, needing time, needing quiet, needing to process Ethiopia before she could face questions and debriefs and the weight of other people's expectations. The memorial garden sat quiet under the stars. 3 years had passed since that day. 3 years of building a program. 3 years of training handlers. 3 years of turning pain into purpose and loss into legacy. Riley sat cross-legged on the grass. Marcus stood respectfully nearby. Sam occupied his usual spot on the bench. And Maya, about to officially retire for real this time, sat with Valor and Rex's legacy at her feet, looking at the 12 memorial stones that marked the warriors who'd made her who she was. That's the real story, Maya said quietly. Not the legend, not the screenshots. The truth about what happened when a maintenance worker turned out to be something else entirely. Riley wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for showing us what it really means to serve. Don't thank me yet, Maya said gently. You deploy in 6 months. Let's see how you feel after you have made the calls I taught you to make. She stood. Both dogs rose with her. Tomorrow they dedicate this facility officially. Master Chief Maya Cordero K9 Training Excellence Center, speeches, photos, ceremony. But tonight here, this is what matters. She gestured to the memorial stones. These 12 warriors. This is the truth the ceremony won't capture. This is what service costs. Sam stood with effort, moved to join her. What will you do after retirement? Montana, small ranch, space to run, no alarms, no deployments. These two have earned rest. She touched both dogs. Real rest. And the program? Doesn't need me anymore. It needs you and the 127 handlers who came through it and the next generation. She looked at Riley. Legacy isn't about one person. It's about what continues after you're gone. Riley stood, brought her hand up in salute. Then I'll carry it forward, Master Chief. I'll honor what you taught. I'll remember dogs are warriors, not tools. I'll form bonds that matter. And I'll bring my partner home alive. Maya returned the salute, held it, then lowered her hand. Then you learned well. She walked toward the exit, paused at the gate, looked back at the 12 stones one final time. Silent service, eternal watch, until the end. Then she was gone, walking toward her car, toward Montana, toward the future that waited beyond fences and training yards and memorial gardens. Two dogs walked beside her. Warriors who'd earned their rest. Partners who'd chosen her. Brothers in arms spending their remaining years running free. Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, witnessing but not judging. Present for every ceremony and tragedy and quiet moment when legends walked away from spotlights into well-earned peace. Somewhere in Ethiopia, 3 children played in a village that almost became their graveyard. They didn't know the warrior's name. Didn't know about the scarred dog who'd tracked them through hostile territory. Didn't know about the Navy Cross recipient who'd come out of retirement because lives were on the line. They just knew someone came. That warriors still exist who risk everything for strangers. And that was enough. That was everything. That was what it meant to be Ghost Unit. Silent service, eternal watch, until the end.